Alright, so I've cleared the front end, the two tone snacks. Alright, so I've cleared some areas in the front end where board leakage can be an issue. I'll do a quick test of these just to see what is leaking at the moment, and then we'll apply some heat and clear off the wax and dirt as best we can. Clear all those eyelets from the old solder, clear the flux with some isopropyl, and then reassemble it all and check it. So I got halfway through cleaning this board and just looking underneath, I saw what almost looked like a bit of a wax build-up underneath on the insulating board, but looking closely, looks like gaff tape. So here we are thinking we've got a pretty, not pristine, but a pretty at least original amplifier, and not so. Some dickhead's been in here and put gaff tape under the board, so that board has to come out for us to inspect now. Alright, since we've removed the bias board for rebuilding, might be able to slide this out, but what's probably happened is during soldering and rework in the past, the various eyelets have probably melted into the tape and stuck itself in place. Just trying to remove it in sections. I think we're free now. Yep, sliding around. We'll slide it out and have a look. Alright. Why would you do that? Seriously, in every amp there's just inexplicable shit. It's like without fail there's just some creatively incompetent weirdo just on a meth binge, just doing weird shit to their amp for no reason at all. Why would you put gaff tape on an insulating card? Like, so now it's got, because gaff tape's shit, it's meant to be taken off an hour after you put it on, or a day after you put it on, not left on things. So now that sticky shit isn't coming with tape, it's there for good. So I'm gonna have to probably take that home and soak it in something real obnoxious like paint thinner to get that shit off, because isopropyl, it removes small sections of that stuff, like residue left where tape was taken off, you know, a couple of weeks after it was put on, but it won't remove that. Like, all of the adhesive is staying on there. So I'll have to take that home and soak it in some thinners overnight or something. Might be a good excuse to leave and go and chill at home. Because I'm getting a bit over all these silver face restorations. Look, all I can glean from this is, I reckon it's once again a case of board leakage and whoever worked on it not wanting to believe that that was the case. They will do literally anything other than clean the board in order to solve board leakage issues. Oh, let's replace the caps. It's got to be the caps. Let's cover the insulating board with tape, even though it's got bits of copper floating around on it. But you know. So yeah, board leakage. It's not fixed by any of this stuff, right? All right, champions. We're back with the Super 6 Reverb. Just dug in and got it all done. We've reused the components wherever the drift isn't too bad. Similar story to the Princeton, you know. Disconnected the hum balance pot there. We've just put two fusible resistors down there like we like to do. Those pots often fail, resulting in hum. No, nothing catastrophic, just all of a sudden one day the pot loses continuity and it starts to hum. Lack of heater balance. Full recap. As I think you saw on the last one, I was going into that. We've reused those beautiful blue caps wherever we can because they're nice. We've done some rework in the phase inverter over here. There was some dodgy previous work. We've also moved a couple of points just to make it a bit more logical. I think someone had been in there and cut leads in the previous cap, so things were too short and things were put in different eyelets as a result. Down here I moved some eyelets where there was plenty of room in one eyelet. We didn't need the link wire between the two, and that just got it a bit further away from that grid connection, which is always good. We've changed the value of that cap, which is a V5B bypass cap, to 4.7 microfarad for reasons I'll outline later. We changed the reverb driver bias point. Previously had a 470 ohm there, which runs that valve way too hot and destroys things. Just cleaned up a lot of the wiring. I've given it a test. Over here I'm getting a little tiny hint of ticking, so I'll clean these wires up a bit better. In hindsight, I didn't put as much attention in there as I should have, as the other areas, but we'll clean that up and that will sort that out. Redone the mains. Sorry, I've got my test leads attached here again. So yeah, same as Princeton. Neutral, neutral, active, active. Comes in, goes for the fuse tip. Disconnected the 240, the international voltage switch there as well, because that phenolic wafer is starting to flex pretty dramatically. Waiting to fail. New screwing, grid resistors, new power supply. Got rid of those old diodes. We've reworked the bias, so now we've got a trim pot soldered to the back. I went to say welded, soldered to the back there, so that changes the overall bias point, and then you've still got the original balance there, so you can really dial in the output stage for minimal hum and optimal bias point. All the hardware came off. I gave the front panel a good clean and tightened all the pots, you know, the usual. All the grounds removed from the transformer hardware. Just want those nuts to just hold the transformer in place, not be expected to be terminals for anything. Had some value changes here to, although we weren't supposedly what they call black facing the phase inverter to the output stage, we were changing some values there to suit what Fender already changed. Some were like, I think Lyle went over that in his last live stream. They scaled some of the components but not others to the same ratio, so there was some funny EQ things happening there. So now this will sound more like your traditional twin. And a lot of the work was just cleaning the wax off the board as usual. Now we're getting like no conduction at all, and it is supremely quiet even with the controls turned well up. Now regarding the bias, we're maxed out there in my little trim pot, and that's only coming up to about 45%, 50% max. So I might change that resistor. That resistor's making a divider pulling the ground. So that's like the pull down resistor, so we'll probably change that down to say a 7.5k, something like that, and in series with the 10k pot that should land us into a more usable range. Alright, so now I've landed on a 6.8k. We're aiming for about 2.7, 2.8 volts per side, and we're pretty well there, champions. Good stuff. And that's pulling about 128 watts from the wall. And there she is down there. Alright, so I'll give this a quick sound test on the bench, just make sure everything's cool. And I've just got the tube amp Dr. Test reverb tank back there. We'll check the reverb tank that's actually in the cabinet, and then we'll look at getting this thing back together. So we're just going to check now it's warmed up for board leakage. First stage we've got about 5 millivolts. None on the film caps, it's just because this is closest to the plate connection on the ceramic. About 6 millivolts. That's 345 volts, about 10 millimeters away from it. On the film caps, 1 millivolt. About 1 millivolt. Reverb return, about 3 millivolts. That's 345 volts, about 8 millimeters from it. Alright, so here's the top side. We've got our repopulated cap board there. Those droppers were still intolerant, so I left them in. Put some new bleeders down there though. Tube amp Doctor caps are my go-to at the moment. Haven't had a failure yet, and they're 105 rated, so that's nice too. All the valves working okay. The valve sockets cleaned up okay. Retensioned the contacts, particularly in the octal sockets. Now all these valves tested okay and they balanced up okay, but this one here is loose in its base. The actual valve base glue was let go. Now I've heard of guys like injecting silicone and stuff down there, which is a bit messy, but that I didn't notice any microphonics when I was testing it, but you can imagine with the speaker behind it, it's probably going to get worse, not better, and could stress the wires that go down into the valve pins at the bottom. But the most I could pull out of this was about 68 watts with various impedance tests. That was the most I could get out of it, so they're probably a bit tired anyway. So I'll offer the owner, if he wants to in the future, near future, we can put a new set in there and bias them up. It's funny looking at the Mesa valves. Mesa don't make valves. You can see in the light there scuff marks. It's actually where they've taken off the manufacturer's logo so they can print their own on and claim credit. You can see the leftover of the writing there. I think on one of the others I could just make out Sovtech. So yeah, Mesa don't make valves. Now just a side note, Brad's Tech Tips. This Tube Amp Doctor Reverb tank sounds really nice. And I got it half price from Tube Amp Doctor themselves, because there's some minor paint imperfections. Who cares? It goes in a gig bag. Gig bag? Goes in a bag. So yeah, that was fantastic. So have a look at the Tube Amp Doctor specials page for stuff like that. Actually, no, don't. I want to keep them all to myself. Forget that. I got these just as spares, but also for my own builds. But one thing you might want to do now, listen. Hey, hey, hey. That tin's really ringy, the pan. So you've probably seen on some fenders where they put bits of foam tape or like a strip of you know, semi-thick rubber on there just to damp it down. So that's the price you pay, but you know, it might ring out when it's in a combo cabinet, but you'd probably be okay in a head cabinet. So a combination of some damping rubber or something, as well as it being in the soft bag. Don't get those thin vinyl bags. I kind of like the genuine Fender ones. It'd be good if someone else made them too, but they've got a bit of padding in them, like a little bit of mass to them, which damps the tank down a bit as well. And there's all our leftover parts, which I always bag up and give back to the customer. About 9 times out of 10 they just tell me to throw them in the bin there and then, but as long as I do it while they're there, that way no one can accuse me of trying to sell these like anyone would want them. Well, no one sane would want them anyway, eh? So now I'll get on to fixing up the wiring in this cabinet. Unfortunately they've gone with two C12Ks, which not to my taste, but they are to others, so whatever. If you recall from the first video, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it. They're wired in, or out of phase by accident by someone. Someone's used these like auto spade crimp connector things, and the crimps don't look real good. It looks like someone's just used some pliers. You can see the serrations there, so that's no good. We'll solder these properly like they should be, because remember, your integrity of the load on the amp equals the integrity of the amp. Otherwise you might damage the amplifier running it without a load. So it's not an area you want to play with. So there's a bunch of sawdust in the amp, and you can see the little notches taken out of the baffle there, so I think the customer might have drilled these in, and there's still a bit of sawdust in the area, so I think I better give the speakers a bit of a clean with compressed air, because they could have some sawdust in them that'll rattle along as you're playing if it's stuck between the surround and the basket. And yeah, sure enough, one of the spade connectors just fell off. It stayed attached to the speaker, and the wire just pulled out the end of it because it wasn't really crimped. So let's solder them instead. This is just like lamp cable, so we might put something a little bit nicer in there too. It literally looks like it's been pulled off a lamp with that horrible 70s grey colour. And then the other cable is this sort of hi-fi grade clear figure 8 stuff. But if you look closely there, that's really bad. It's asking to short out, and it's also showing some corrosion. So I think we better open that up and have a look. Like as if I wasn't going to anyway. Sure. No, yeah, wow. That insulation's just fallen apart there. It's gone all cheesy. Fat pizza, they're big and they're cheesy. So I'll replace that wire, because I hate this wire. It's really low grade stuff. I'm not a fan of it. And yeah, that one's trying to pull out as well. You can just see the plier marks there with the serrations. A lot of amps that come in are nothing more than a collection of weak points just waiting to fail by the time they make it to me. And by the time it makes it to me, usually 2 or 3 of them have failed. like a channel will drop out or something will be intermittent or the reverb won't work, and then it comes in when there's no signal at all. That's when people decide to bring it in. So it's sort of standard that there's a whole bunch of weak points in any given amp, because over the years there's been lots of suboptimal work done to them, to put it politely. I'm just not a fan of these connectors in general. I think I'm going to replace it with a nice strain relieved amp phenol, so there'll be no problems in the future. Alright, I removed the bottom cover, put some new cables in there, put a little cable clamp on there, just to stop them from potentially rattling against the cones or anything. They're not tight, but they're just located by that little cable clamp. And in the process, I just went around and tightened up all the speaker screws and the baffle screws. Most of these were just like not even finger tight, they were just vibrating around, rattling, so the speaker was barely fixed. But now that's all addressed, and cleaned out all the sawdust stuff and residue that was in the bottom of the cab as well before putting the reverb tank back in. So champions, here's the way I like to do it. I've got a little bit of heat shrink up there to stop the wires from separating or unraveling. I've got an Amphenol ACPM right angle. I actually remembered to put the cover on this time first go, which is almost never happens. You techs will know what I'm talking about. Then a bit of heat shrink, so the little crimp there isn't, you don't cinch it right up, but so it isn't cutting through the insulation. Just gives a little bit more reinforcement to the insulation there. And then the connection actually folded over and soldered. So yeah, they're the connectors I like. Real heavy duty stuff, they do make a heavier duty version of this. It's actually got a gland and clamps onto the cable, but you need a fatter cable for that. And I don't know, something about a classic style amp having big fat, like PA style speaker, black cable, insulated, it just doesn't look right. I think this looks a bit, even though it is modern stuff, it just looks a bit more guitar ampy, don't you think? So just look at the rear cover where the screws were. They didn't use any cup washers, as I mentioned in the first video, so the screws are sort of digging in. But it looks like they have countersunk them, so that lends itself to using the Fender style cup washers. If they're not like a traditional cup washer like that, that's like a ridge, they're sort of countersunk ones. I'll show you. So there's little buggers there, just like little countersunk cups, nickel plated. And there's one installed, showing the difference between there and how it came in. So that just evens the pressure out, stops it from cutting the Tilex. And I even put a couple of cable clamps in there for the reverb cable, as well as the power cable for a bit of strain relief, because it's not just the electronics champions, it's the whole package. Another one bites the dust, champions. I'm off for a couple of days off, so hopefully I'll get some time to edit these videos before I go so I can entertain you in my absence. But again, this one was a little bit more work than expected. I think we're going to have to be a bit more pessimistic with the silver face restorations because they do require a lot of work just to get them stable. But I think that's sounding fantastic now, and there's something undeniable about the punch of it. Well, now a twin. What used to be a Super 6, but essentially the same circuit. But I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was some help of other people staring down the barrel of a similar project and seeing what they're in for. So I'll see you on the next one, legends. Until then, take it squeezy.